Hello. Hello and welcome to Wholesome Conversations with Holistic Edu. So today we have with us Sudha Ravi. And Sudha is an educator. She's a passionate educator and she has had over 25 years of experience in this field. In her long career, she has worn multiple hats as a facilitator, as a mentor, and as a headmistress at Prakriya Green Wisdom School. She currently works as a mentor to the facilitators at the school. She's a storyteller par excellence. Her gentle words and her empathy make her a beautiful mentor to many people. It's our honor to have her here with us, and she believes truly in including more spirituality in education. And I thought she would be the perfect person to speak to about reflection and learning. So let me add her here. Hello, Sudha.
Hi, Pooja. So nice to be
Hi,
here.
we are so honored to have you here. When
Thank
we
you.
took up this topic of reflection and learning, I spoke to a lot of people asking who would be the perfect person for Saturday, and your name came through so many sources that I just knew I had to have you for this Saturday conversation. It's uh,
Thank
it's
you.
something about the way you it's something about the way you talk, Sudha. The way you hold space. It's sort of soothing, it's calming, and I felt that that's a lot that's needed for reflection, for spirituality, holding that space for people and just letting them think. So you yourself, I'm sure, have a lot of practices which include spirituality and reflection. To begin with, I've been reading a bit about reflection when we had to do this week, and
Yeah,
I came across this quote which said that we don't learn by our experiences, but we learn by reflecting on our experiences. So
absolutely.
I thought you would be the best person to enlighten me on this quote. Like, what is the importance of reflection in learning?
Yeah. Pooja, when you were talking about reflection and learning, I think to begin with, learning often is seen only as a very academic thing. But if you look at it, learning is through life, right from the time we're born till we leave this earth, we are learning continuously. And if you look at it, how we learn differently. I mean, each of us have a different style of learning. We learn by listening, we learn by watching, observing, role modeling, and a whole lot of things, you know. But if you look at learning per se, it's full of experiences, you know. Learning is all about experiences, uh, and the experiences which are connected with emotions usually have an impression in our mind, they leave residues. But uh, but if I have to look at experiences without reflection, it just reminds me of that little Zen story in which this man is sitting on a horse cart and going on a, in a high speed. And as he crosses the market, one person asks him, "Hey, where are you going?" And he says, "I don't know, ask the horse." It's exactly like that experience without reflection. I would compare to the man on the horse cart. So, and to be honest, if you look at reflection as a style of thinking, I think our Indian tradition has been full of it. Even the word, what you call Sudarshana, it's often used in mythological stories about the Sudarshan Chakra. But if you look at the word Sudarshana, it is basically to look within. So can't really take away the importance of reflection. I think it's so, so vital. Uh, and if you look at experience, I mean, of late, there are a lot of, hype on selling experiences, literally, that experience will make a lot of difference. And for the matter, even if a travel agency is actually wanting to sell a ticket to another place, they don't say, "I'm going to sell you a ticket to Paris or to India, they say that I'm going to sell experience. But what gets left out is a reflection. So I mean, absolutely with you in that quote. Yeah.
Wow. And I'm so happy that you brought in a story with that, And I was hoping you would
Yeah.
do that, but it's so like you to have a story for every topic, for every concept, and it that made it so much easier. I visually could see that man on the horse just aimlessly going wherever the horse goes, just taken by that.
Absolutely.
So, like we started off with talking about, since you believe in this so strongly, since you believe in reflection being the way we learn from learning, how do you practice it daily in your own life or your own learning? How do you practice reflection and growing with that reflection?
So, Pooja, as you know, I've been a teacher at heart and, teacher through my life, and really, really enjoyed that profession. And so I will talk both as a teacher and as a person. So I think one of the things which has really helped me both as a teacher and in person is the ability to take a pause, because very often when we are in the thick of things, when we are doing, whether it is in teaching or it is in our interaction, uh, we rarely take that little pause or, take a step back to look at what exactly is happening, and what are the kind of emotions I'm going through, what are the thoughts I'm having, or even in my class. I think one practice which really, really helps is the ability to just be mindful. Reflection and mindfulness really go together, because if I'm able to be mindful, I'm just present, I'm completely there. And when I'm completely there, you're able to gauge uh, the emotions or the energy levels or the unarticulated expressions. So I think it's really important. Reflection, has to be a very important tool for all of us, whether as a teacher or whether as a child. I think if I have to really say that, reflection is a tool which can be taught. Some of us would have it naturally, but I am sure this is something that can be taught to children, to adults, all of us. So, yeah, I think taking a pause
Okay.
and having a spectator location, I think it makes a whole lot of difference.
Wonderful. So, a lot of this is something that we are recently, like, I know I have gotten to it now, much later after finishing schooling, college, doing quite a bit of my
Yeah,
career. And now I learned that, oh, reflection is also something I could have done. And then you, of course, wish you had known it before. You wish you had known it in your formative years. But at what
absolutely.
age could one really allow that to happen? Like, now we are at a point where you know what it means to take a spectator stage
Pause.
and look at your own experience as an outsider
Yeah,
and learn from it. But what about a
true.
young child? At what age could a child start
Yeah.
reflecting?
I think exactly like you. I wish somebody had really taught me also when I was in school, right then, to learn how to reflect on my mistakes, to learn how to reflect on when things are happening, well, I think it often doesn't happen in most of the schools, because reflection takes time, and even though it is such a great tool, it is not really given the place that it ought to be. So if you actually ask me when can it be started, to be honest, a very small child who's even entering into school can be taught reflection. Like, I know that perplexed look says that how come, but yeah. So if you look at a young child is very intuitive. Whether it's a baby, if you see a baby also is very intuitive, is able to sense Is it a safe person? Is it a unsafe person? Or is this noise okay? I mean, a child, a very, very young child is intuitive. But with a little child who's come into school or whether at home as an adult, you know, especially with open-ended stories, with conversations, we can actually sow the seed of reflective thinking. Because if I have to right now look at the generation, I think they're all in that hurry to tell me what to do, give me the answer, or that instant gratification is something that is very obvious now, because they're just getting everything at the click of a button. And uh, so I think as adults, whether it's parents or teachers, it's about not giving everything on a platter, and not expecting them to do the way that you want to do or the way you think is right, because a child is an individual by himself or herself. So I have seen that, when you allow exploration, when you allow experimentation, when you allow expression, of what is happening, why you're doing what you're doing, what what if this happened, what will you do? I think children are able to reflect. But very often, I think we need to uh, stop ourselves to say that I'm there for you and I'm going to give it all to you. So I think it's a lot in our hands. And yes, definitely, I believe that children in nursery school can start, and in a very simple way. No,
Wow. So, what kind of, like, say, maybe at a school you've been at, what kind of practices would someone want to keep in their classroom for, like you said, nursery, for a child that young? What sort of a structure would you put in place to allow reflection?
so typically, if you look at learning, very often as a teacher, you may one tries to become either an inputter or a molder. An inputter is somebody who wants to give, transfer information and share the knowledge. Or as a molder, it is that approach of saying that, I have the ability to change or transform you. But there are other approaches, like, a co-traveler, somebody who is traveling along with you in the journey of learning, and it could be anything. So a co-traveler never tells you what to do. He or she is also a part of the journey. Or, like a catalyst, somebody who just provides a trigger and says, okay, go find out. And especially, I think the school that I'm part of, I have actually seen children, when we have an emergent curriculum. An emergent curriculum is a curriculum where the children take ownership of learning. I think that's a great part of reflective learning, that the learner takes ownership. He's no more a passive learner. So I
Hmm.
think it's all about those things, having circle time, having open-ended conversations, having stories which are incomplete, and saying, what do you think will be the end of the story? What if you were the character? All these actually, and also things like waiting for your turn. I think that's a area where everybody is wanting to be heard. Everybody is wanting that, it is my turn. So how do you be? I think little things. These are practices that can be done both at home as well as school.
Okay. Wow, that's nice. So I heard delayed gratification, I heard open ended questions, I heard stories that pull in the students and also get them to start thinking about what ifs.
Yeah,
So a lot of that I see can go for like the emergent curriculum. I've seen that with the Balambika
yeah,
Kids at Prakriya. So I know that
yeah,
that works beautifully.
yeah.
As we grow up now, say primary school, that gives a lot more opportunities. I think that's where people really play around with alternative education, really. So
Yeah.
what have you seen, or what do you suggest for educators who are in that age, like for the primary school children? What kind of strategies could they use in their classrooms to allow for
Yeah.
that sort of a reflection?
So I think when we're talking about reflection, there are at least three kinds of reflections, you know. One reflection is when you are in the process of learning, you know, you have not completed, but you're in the process of learning. There's another reflection where you are actually reflecting on what is happening to you. When you've heard something, when you've seen something, when you've read something, what is it happening? What are the emotions that are happening to you? Then the other kind of reflection is reflecting back on something, you know, some incident or whatever which has happened. So if we have to look at in the primary school, uh, there's something called the active learning methodology. So in active learning methodology, the approach is basically the resources are available for the child. You know, the learning resources, whether it is, it could be a video, it could be a story, it could be a reading material, it could be just a narration. So there is a resource to it. But the learning from that is taken up by the children with the guidance of the teachers. You know, so it could be collaborative, it could be individual, it could be pairs, a whole lot of things. You know, so these kind of practices allow children to reflect on what they've heard, what they have, you know, seen, and all of that. So that's academic in nature. But the other
Mm-hmm.
is when a child makes a mistake. You know, I think that is something which we have seen in schools and whatever, even at homes. That mistake is looked as something wrong. But if you look at nature, you know, in nature, dung is a manure. You know, there's nothing which is waste. So how do we also enable children to use their mistakes as a resource for learning rather than looking at it as something not right? So I think for a teacher also to say that, you know, how do I use mistakes as an opportunity rather than, you know, to tick off the child. So I think these are practices which really help in. Yeah.
Wonderful. One of the things I'd seen in practiced in some school was journaling, but journaling in the sense
Yeah.
they would have like a question journal. So after they've
Yeah.
taught a concept, the kids go back home and note down any queries that they may have had, which they didn't have at that time during those 40 minutes,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
bring it back.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
So
that really comes across, yeah, in different subjects, whether it is in English or, you know, through when we are doing, we do something called the thematic learning. So these are areas where children do reflective writing to look at from their context, because I think one thing which is usually a challenge is most of the books that we have, uh, you know, it gives the kind of curriculum that is there in the books are like, you know, domestic animals are useful for us, or you know how the trees are useful for us. It comes from a very anthropocentric approach to say, you know, everything around us is for our use. But it really helps when you have a conversation with children to look at, you know, is it really true that everything around us is for our use? And I think that those are the kind of reflective writing that they end up sitting and doing, and which allows them to actually question certain beliefs which have been picked up very unconsciously, you know. And I think it really helps to helps us in the long run to make choices, to alter the lens through which we see the world. I think it makes a whole lot of difference.
yes, that's so true. And we really never stop to think when we're going through classes and we go from one class to the other. We tend to just blindly absorb whatever is there in the textbook. It's I think only in one of our
Absolutely.
conversations that we were having in Bhumi or something when we thought when the same sentence was brought up of forests provide timber to build houses or something of that sort, and
Yeah,
that was the first time I thought of, oh really, we never thought of the other side of the
absolutely.
sentence.
True, true.
Right. Yeah, that really brings about the need for the child to sit
Yeah,
and think about things like
yeah,
this. Right. So
absolutely.
we then We then spoke about nursery, where we are saying that that's, where the seeds of reflection could be sown, and
Yeah,
primary, where we are growing it into young saplings. What about when we
absolutely.
go into higher classes, when you have curriculum, you have exams, board exams especially, and then there is this rush to finish the syllabus? Is there still, but
Yeah,
then this is also a very important age where the child is now going to, enter the world, the real world. So
yeah,
you also want him to be a reflective thinker. You want him to think before just blindly picking up any
yeah.
information that's given to you. So, how does an educator then allow time and space for reflection in her classrooms?
Yeah, I think this is a universal challenge which I've heard across, oh my, it's the higher classes and it's the board exams and curriculum has to be completed. But to be very honest, it's not about looking at an extra time, I don't think any teacher get an extra time out after school or anything, but it's about how do you weave it in through with your curriculum. It doesn't have to be fragmented to say, I'm doing my curriculum and then I'm going to do a reflection. To say the curriculum itself, and especially with older children, I think they are also at a at an age where they have a whole lot of questions on why are things the way they are, and what they see around in the society and things like that. I think it's a fantastic age to tap in, to use the curriculum, not to say that, I separate the two. So it can be done, and I've seen, especially, and it also depends on the kind of approach that you're using. Because when you use inquiry-based learning or project-based learning, I've seen lot of opportunities for actually reflection. I think if I have to, uh, something that I remembered was the live projects which the older children do,
Hmm.
especially in the school where I am part of. So they actually work with real issues, whether it is saving the lake or taking care of the lake, or it could be interacting with the village around. So uh, through the process, there is a whole lot of reflection that they have to do, because they don't have ready-made answers. And so that's also an age where they can have a whole lot of reflective practices. And they also have, that's also an age where they have questions about what do I do in life, and about their identity and about their personality and about the peer pressure. So circle time comes in a big way for reflection, and circle time is, I think most of us know, it is a process where we all sit together and actually talk, things which are, live with each of us. So I think that's how for the older children. And
Hmm.
and I think now that the, what do you call, the COVID, during the Corona time, I think that's one thing children really miss, because being around with their peers, there is a lot of opportunity to have those conversations, to have a sounding board, so all of that also makes a lot of difference. But definitely sensitive teachers who can make time and space just to have that little conversation. It doesn't have to be a big dialogue or anything. It makes a lot of difference too. Yeah.
That's a wonderful way to look at it. Before we go to the next question, I would just like to tell all the viewers that if you have any questions for Sudha, please put it down in the Facebook comments, and we'll try and take them as we go. Yeah. So, with that, I'd like to go to the next question. We've been talking a lot about school and practices that educators can use now, especially in the time of the pandemic, where the kids are at home and parents are with them. This would also be a brilliant opportunity for parents to indulge in making more reflective practices for themselves as well as for their children. So, would you have
Absolutely.
anything to share with the parents for this?
So I think, yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot about how challenging it is at home, where the parents are working, the children are also on the screen. it's been quite a challenge. But and also I have kind of come across with children with a lot of anxiety issues because of what is happening around. So all the more reason for the adults at home to have conversations at the level of the child, because just engaging with the child and uh, hearing him or her out actually helps in taking away that, the fear of the unknown, because I think I see a lot of children having that kind of issue. So I think reflecting also comes through these informal conversations with the parents that they do. And the topmost thing which I feel as parents is not to give all answers and not to give everything at the drop of a hat, uh, to allow exploration to happen, to say, okay, let's find out what is it, rather than saying, I know, come here, I'll tell you what to do. I think that's so important as adults. That, you allow that time for questions, you allow time
Hmm.
for sharing emotions, you allow time for uh, admitting your own mistakes, to say that, I goofed it up today. And so the child is also learning a big lesson in life, to say that, it's not about only being right and being correct, that I can goof it up and I don't have to feel ashamed, I don't have to feel guilty about it. So reflection at home in such a way also sows that seed for a healthy and emotionally and physically well-being for the child.
Right. I've heard this as a thread in so many of my conversations now. The giving space for mistakes and allowing the child to, the time to actually find his or her own
Yeah.
answers rather than just giving the. You have a lot of these
Yeah.
worksheets. When we were in school, at least we used to have these questions and then the worksheets. So all that you really had to do, the answers were right there. So there wasn't really much of thinking. It was more of just
Yeah,
remembering or recall that was there.
true.
So
In fact,
true.
even as a math teacher, I have realized that, uh, talking about math, because math is always looked as doing something or getting it fast, and just this whole thing of reflecting on, reflecting on the question which is given, uh, so that, you're engaging with the process and not just getting caught with the final answer and all that. So the vocabulary of math really gets built when you're doing a reflection on that side. So I think reflection by itself, puja, is a big word, and it can start from your balambika, that is a nursery stage,
Mhm.
till you're an adult when you're actually asking, who am I? So reflection
So
is at all levels, absolutely.
so true. Like even right now, I know that we barely have got a few seeds from this conversation to begin the journey of reflection. That it's a whole world out there. But just having those
Absolutely.
seeds are so important. Just knowing a
So
few practices or just knowing the basic importance of why we need to start exploring.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so thanks for
In
that.
fact,
So that was.
even as no, even as teachers, Pooja, I think the reflective practice is actually a big tool. I think personally, I also went through something like that. It's basically wherein you contemplate on something which you are really fired by, and you're wondering, you would have had all your plans in place. You've done your research, you've done everything, and you bring it to the class with a lot of hope that things are going to really work out and this class is going to be the best class. Something just doesn't happen, it doesn't work out the way you planned, and
Hmm.
then you left with, why did it not happen, what happened? But that tool, when even as a teacher you're able to reflect and say, okay, I did all of this, so what did not work well? So I gather my own little data, and I also find out what else could be the. I think that's also when we learn about children much more, that.
Hmm.
So I think reflective practice for a teacher is a huge. It's a big tool. I feel, you know.
Right.
Something I think action research is something which is very popular, where it is also documented to look at, the concerns which you are having with your area of whatever is you're concerned with.
Okay. Action research, you're saying? Is that like a strategy, or what does action research
Yeah.
mean?
So action research is basically, for example, I think since I was in alternative school, and since in an alternative school there are a whole lot of processes that we give a lot of importance in processes and looking at how does
Hmm.
a child learn and all of that. But very often, it can get mistaken for this is a place where there may be no rules or there may be no rigor. It's a myth that people can think that in an alternative school there are no rigor and things. So
Hmm.
so that was one area where I was kind of concerned to find out, how do we bring a balance of the two, because both are required. So action
Hmm.
research, at least for me personally, was, to find out, okay, why is it so? Is it in the minds of people, or is it because there are gaps in certain things that I'm doing? So action
Hmm.
research is when I'm actually trying to find out what are the concerns, what are the gaps, trying to collate data, and then trying to put a plan in action and see if it really works and reflect on it. So that's a tool which, quite a few teachers can actually use.
Okay, brilliant. So, are there more tools like this that educators can use? Because one of the other things I was reading about was how, when you have reflective practices in your teaching, that also forms like a model for the students to follow. And if you could even share with them
Absolutely.
that, this is what I did to prepare for class, this is what I, like even owning up
Yeah.
to not mistakes but something like
Yeah.
this, like I planned the class but it didn't work out, so I went back and
Yeah.
reflected on it when you share that with
Yeah.
the student. So
Yeah.
what else
So,
like that could, yeah.
yeah. No, I think what you're saying is bang on, Pooja, because unless as an adult practice, I have some reflective practice, I don't think I can expect the child or even teach a child to do so. It's as simple as saying that if I am not mindful in my work, I cannot expect a child to be mindful. So it's so important that as a teacher, am I practicing reflective thinking as a habit? Like how you said, whether it is my mistakes or whether it is, looking at how do I feel? How did I feel in that class? Or what are the emotions that I'm having? To actually to have conversation, I think owning up vulnerability is something that really is of an advantage when you can, uh, you know, uh, I think I have to share an example when I was doing a math class, and I did notice this little child sitting at the corner, and I did come to know that he was a little apprehensive about math, and there was a little anxiety about math and all that. And then I just remembered at his age, which was like 9, 10, I had goofed up heavily with math. And then I actually sat and told him the incident of how I had got a zero in my paper. And then suddenly I saw his eyes all twinkling, and then he came forward and he asked me, how many times did you get a zero? But that was not the incident. The incident was, that I was able to share with him that, I mean, it's not about being a genius or anything. Uh, it actually made a difference in his approach to math. So, I mean, just owning up your vulnerability also really makes a whole lot of difference.
That's so true. That's been a lot of insights that we've had from you, and I know there are so many more, but there's just so much of time that we have.
Yeah, true.
uh, but uh, like I'm sure we would, a lot of them would also like to. So maybe once we have a few more comments, like post the session, if people put some more comments, we would love to have more practices that educators and parents can use for their children and for themselves. Like even now, I still feel that's, a whole world to explore in reflection, and I've just opened the door and taken the first step, and there's
Yeah,
miles and miles to go. But
true, absolutely.
but thank you for
No,
this, Sudha. Yeah, Sudha, tell me.
no. Sorry.
Yeah. So I was saying thank you for this, and it has been an absolute delight. So thank you for taking the time out and sharing all your thoughts with us. It has been really lovely. So thank you. We will save this and share it on Facebook as well as our YouTube. So I'm sure a lot of people who have not been able to attend the live conversation. Oh, we do have
Yeah,
someone now. If you could, Sudha, could you please share some
yeah,
ways in which adults can learn to be reflective in their daily life? Is there something you would like to share on?
yeah. Absolutely. I think, as I just spoke about, like, if as an adult, if I'm not reflective, I really can't expect a child to be reflective. And as an adult, at least personally, what I have seen for myself is when I'm able to take that pause, like there is that window of opportunity when I have had experience and I'm responding to that there is a small window of opportunity between that, where I can take a pause and actually, you know reflect on what is happening to me, especially in terms of emotions. So I feel just, if the practice of being a spectator onto oneself actually helps a lot in being reflective. The other I find, that, the journal writing. I think that really makes a lot of difference. A little notebook for oneself at the end of the day, just jotting down. Things that really I was excited about, things that I was disturbed by, and actually it helps us to see a pattern or join the dots. So journal writing is something that really helps. But mindfulness is something I strongly advocate, and mindfulness as a way of life, to say that, when I'm doing something, am I there completely? Uh, Easier said than done, but it can be practiced. Uh, I think that's something which I
Right.
would recommend. Yeah.
Wonderful. Sudha, we have someone else who says, how can administrators give themselves the space to reflect and own up to their vulnerability like you did with the math fearing boy?
Yeah. So I must tell you that the school, which I'm sure there are other schools also, there are many schools which do that. Uh, so we do take time off at least once or twice in a year, where we are actually looking at, we actually sit in groups. It's more like a circle time, to look at what are our blind spots, what are the things that are working well for us, what are the things that maybe we need to change. And I think that has been a very powerful tool when we do it with all the members of, the community. So it's not just the teachers, it be sometimes the support staff, it is the administrators. So I think continuously having these kind of sessions. We also call it the retreat. I don't know whether you will be knowing that we spend, mandatorily every year we spend time reflecting on our patterns. What are the things that bothers us? What are the things that enables us? Or what? And even as a school, what are the things that uh, help us focus in on our vision for what we are coming together. So I think for administrators, those are the times when we really reflect. Uh, right now, actually, we are in a process of that, with every member of the community of the school, we have been doing that.
Thank you. Thank you, Sudha. I think that would answer Neeraj's question then.
Okay.
Those were the only two questions we have right now. But feel free to, add the questions even after the Facebook Live ends, and I will request Sudha to take the time out sometime to answer a few of them whenever she
Sure.
can. But thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much, Pooja, and all the best to you and
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you. I will
Bye
end this
bye.
broadcast now and goodbye. Have a good day.
Bye bye.